Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Bliffert Lumber, family-owned and operated for over 120 years. Bliffert serves contractors and homeowners across Milwaukee and southeastern Wisconsin. Learn more at bliffertlumber.com.
From 89.7 WUWM Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today we'll explore the Jewish diaspora for Jewish American Heritage Month. Then we'll get an update on the dogs who've been removed from the Wisconsin breeding facility Ridglan Farms.
We're finding that their needs vary. Some of them need longer foster care or need treatment for medical issues, and some of them have gone up into adoption rather quickly.
Plus, PBS Kids Rejoice. We're talking about Wishbone and the new documentary exploring the beloved show that introduced classic literature to an entire generation.
Yes, this show has a lasting legacy. Yes, kids grew up with a lifelong love of reading. They're passing that on to their children now. Here are the people who made that possible. Stand up and give them some applause.
All that's coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Thanks for joining us today. Most Jewish people in the United States are of Ashkenazi descent, meaning their roots are from Central or Eastern Europe. But the Jewish diaspora also includes Sephardic Jews from Spain and Mizrahi Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. For Jewish American Heritage Month, the Jewish Museum of Milwaukee is hosting an event to bring visibility to these diverse Jewish identities. WUWM's Maayan Silver is joined by Sarah Levin, Executive Director of JIMENA, who is speaking at the event. She begins by explaining the group's name.
I didn't name the organization, and we get a lot of pushback around the name a lot. Yes, I've written about this and I advocate for it. I believe that the vast majority of Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel. And our title does not negate the indigeneity of any other community, and it was never intended to do that. It was solely because it was like a catchy, good name.
Can you explain a little bit of the history of Middle Eastern and North African Jews and about how Jews were displaced from those areas? Just a small snippet.
Yeah. So in the early 1940s, with the rise of Arab nationalism and the influence of Nazism into the Middle East and North Africa, anti-Semitism grew, and anti-Zionist persecution of Jews was used as a legal pretext to ultimately displace, ethnically cleanse, and dispossess close to 1 million Jews from countries throughout the region. And these are countries that Jewish communities lived in for thousands of years since the Babylonian exile, and also since the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, and then the subsequent taking of Jews from Jerusalem. So it's hard for me to answer that question because it's such a big history, but our focus at JIMENA is really making sure that people understand what happened to Jews in the Middle East and North Africa in the 20th century.
So JIMENA is focused in the United States, right? It's more of an American organization?
Yeah. We don't get involved in the politics in Israel at all.
Right. So what is the context that people should know about being a Middle Eastern, North African Jew or Sephardic Jew in Israel versus in the United States? Those are the areas. So Jews make up 0.02% of the world's population, and that's not 2%. That's 0.02% of the world's population. And the Mizrahi and North African Jews that you're talking about are a much greater population in Israel than in the United States.
Yeah, it's more than 50%. More than 50% of the Jewish population in Israel is Mizrahi Sephardi.
And so how does that change the context or how you discuss this issue in that country? Oh, and the other context I was going to mention was that the majority of the world's Jewish population, the reason we're talking about Israel is that the majority of the world's Jewish population is either in Israel or the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And the majority of Sephardic Jews are in Israel. And I think the Sephardic Jews in the United States are very deeply connected to Israel because many people have brothers, sisters, cousins, family members who live there. And many Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews in the United States, when they left the Arab world, they fled to Israel as stateless, dispossessed refugees, and many of them found their way here to the United States after.
And the experience in a Syrian Jewish household in Brooklyn is going to be different from a Persian Jewish household in Los Angeles and a Bukharian Jewish household in Queens or a Latino Jewish household in South Florida. What are some important things to know about Jewish diversity and the experiences of Middle Eastern and North African Jews in this country?
I think what you named is really important to remember. Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are incredibly diverse. They speak all different languages. They come from all different countries, spread over a huge geographic region. They cannot easily be flattened into one lump sum like Sephardi Mizrahi, even though that's what we do, and that's just, I think, a function of communication, right? Like it's easier to describe one whole group using the term Sephardi or Mizrahi. But the communities are actually very diverse, and all of them have different histories, and there were different push and pull factors that led to their leaving the Middle Eastern countries they had lived in. And they were different by city, by country, by region, by year. So, yeah, Syrian Jews have a very different story than Persian Jews.
What does that mean in the United States where, the majority is Ashkenazi Jews? You hear about like matzo ball soup and bagels and kvetching and kvelling and all the Yiddish and all that kind of stuff. What does that mean for like a Jew with Sephardic descent in this country where it's not so visible as in other places?
Yeah, I mean, I think the default Jewish culture in America is Ashkenazi, and it makes sense considering that is the majority of the Jewish population of American Jews. And I think that there's been different reactions and responses based on the community, based on the period of time that they came to the United States, and also based on the structure of the community internally, right? Like for many, my family came to the United States from Turkey. Most of my family members assimilated out into mainstream Jewish life, and there were not strong institutions or infrastructures to keep the community intact versus like the Syrian community in New York or the Persian community in LA, where they don't necessarily need to adapt into the mainstream because they have built all of the infrastructures, all of the organizations and schools that they need to self-sustain their culture and their community. So I think it's different, but the one common denominator is that we are all of us, but especially those of us who immigrated to the United States, have had to find ways to adapt and to make choices about what they're going to accept, what they are going to reject, what they're comfortable with, what their boundaries are. And it's different for everyone. I think it's different. But I also think it's a disadvantage to the mainstream, right? Like when you don't have the full history of the Jewish people, especially Jewish people from the Middle East and North Africa, there are gaps in your knowledge and your ability to have a deep understanding of Israel and of Israeli Jews and of the region at large. And I think that this gap of knowledge and awareness is actually been really detrimental. And I think it's playing out now in ways that are dangerous, I think.
In your presentation on Wednesday, it'll touch upon perceptions and misconceptions of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews within the Jewish community and beyond the Jewish community. Would you be able to share a big misconception?
I think that one of the biggest misconceptions that's actually been really harmful and hurtful and painful is this idea that Sephardi Mizrahi Jews are primitive, are backwards in their thinking, are overly conservative, and are are not as intellectually or spiritually advanced as other Jewish communities. And I mean, I could just break that apart piece by piece, but most people don't know that Jews who lived and thrived in Middle Eastern and North African cities were highly, highly educated. They were urban, they were contributing members of government, of medicine, of every respected field you can think of. And that the orientation of looking at these communities through a Western lens and a Western framework is does a big disservice to the value add and the contributions, the history, the worldviews of Mizrahi Sephardic Jews.
And how does understanding them and learning about them and celebrating their contributions and additions to the culture, how does that help public perception of Jews overall in the world?
So the questions around public perception we're constantly grappling with, right? I feel like perception is just projected on us. I think that the best example of this is during the Holocaust, Jews were persecuted because they weren't white, right? They weren't considered white European. And then right now on the far left, we're being called upholders of settler colonialism and white European oppressors. So it's these perceptions and projections do not come from us. They come from outside of us. I don't think any Jewish leader or institution can properly address how to change those perceptions other than just educating and sharing the stories of who we are and telling the Jewish story and describing the Jewish people without talking about Jews from the Middle East and North Africa is like reading a book with a missing chapter or missing, the first chapter is completely missing. Because Judaism, Jewish civilization, Jewish peoplehood, all of us, regardless of where we were exiled to, we all come from the same place. And we all speak and pray in Hebrew. We all face Jerusalem when we pray, regardless if we're in Yemen, in Iran, in Ukraine, in Ethiopia, in Morocco, in New York City.
You describe yourself as a proud Turkish, Sephardic, and Ashkenazi Jew. The description of the event at the Jewish Museum of Milwaukee notes that you've experienced the complexity and richness of Sephardic and Mizrahi life in America. Are there any personal stories you'd like to share?
I mean, what the research told us, and it's no surprise to anyone who has even an ounce of Sephardi blood inside of them, is that family is central. And it is probably the most important part of Jewish life is how you experience your identity at home with your family. So, I mean, one of my first memories was standing underneath the kitchen table in my great-grandmother's home on Rosh Hashanah lunch and peeking my head up and looking at a tray of pumpkin porekas and being so excited to eat them. And it's so trivial and minute, but it is one of my first memories. And then just feeling the warmth all around me and being surrounded by people who loved me, who I loved, who were comfortable with each other and were experiencing joy together, all of it. So my memories are 100%, except for maybe a few years when I lived in Israel, 100% connected and experienced with my family. And now my husband, I am married to an Iraqi Jew. My mother-in-law is from Baghdad. And I've learned so much about another Mizrahi community and culture and way of being that I love and that I've also integrated into my practices, my rituals, and my way of thinking and living that I'm passing down to my children.
Well, Sarah Levin, Executive Director of JIMENA, Jews Indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Mayan.
That was Sarah Levin, Executive Director of JIMENA, speaking with WUWM's Mayan Silver. Levin will be speaking at an event at the Jewish Museum of Milwaukee tomorrow evening. In about 15 minutes, we'll talk with the team behind the heartfelt documentary about the beloved PBS series that introduced classic literature to an entire generation through the eyes of a Jack Russell Terrier, Wishbone. But first, we'll get an update on the dogs rescued from a breeding facility here in Wisconsin. That's coming up on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. You're listening to Lake Effect on WUWM. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Earlier this month, the Wisconsin Humane Society welcomed the first beagles rescued from Ridglan Farms. That's a dog breeding facility in Blue Mound, Wisconsin that gained national attention after activists broke in. So far, the WHS has taken in 132 beagles from the rescue, which is one of the largest efforts for them in the last decade. Most of these dogs have gone to foster homes since they'll need some extra care and attention before they'll be ready for adoption. So what do you need to know or consider if you're thinking about welcoming one of these beagles into your home? To learn more, I'm joined by Angela Speed, the VP of Marketing and Communications for the Wisconsin Humane Society. She starts by explaining the coordination efforts that help to support these rescued beagles.
Initially, we were contacted by the Dane County Humane Society to see how many dogs we could support with out of a group of 500 that they were coordinating. And we said, at least 150. And if there are other dogs who are not accounted for, we'd be happy to help those as well. And so over the course of 3 days, we took in 132 beagles. We sent transport volunteers out to Dane County each afternoon and brought back groups of dogs. The majority of those dogs have gone straight to foster homes. And currently, most of them are still in foster care. Amazingly, we have been able to adopt out a few dozen of the dogs already into new homes. We're finding that their needs vary. Some of them need longer foster care or need treatment for medical issues. And some of them have gone up into adoption rather quickly and have found placement. The community's support of this project has been overwhelming, and it's just been an honor and a privilege to be part of it.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more about that. How has the community stepped up to support this effort?
Initially, when we first shared that we would be helping, we put out a plea for foster parents and supply donations. We had nearly 500 foster applications for 130 dogs. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We had far more adoption inquiries. People donated dog treats and toys and supplies. Monetary donations came in to help support this group too. And every day we are triaging dozens of inquiries from the public, either for how can I help or when are they going to be available for adoption. The hearts involved in this rescue effort have just floored us. We had a line of adopters. Pretty much every day a beagle was available for adoption. We had one dog who was adopted last week who has stage 5 mammary cancer and is more of a hospice placement. She could live for a few days or a few weeks or a few months, but someone gladly scooped her up and just wanted to provide her with all the love possible that she hadn't gotten before living in that facility. So it's been heartwarming and encouraging, and people have just poured into help other organizations as well. There's so many rescue organizations involved with this project.
Definitely. So you mentioned there was so many fosters at the ready, but before they went to foster homes, all the dogs got medical exams, things like flea and tick medication, dewormer, collars, all the basics to set them up. But these are all high need, I would assume fearful dogs. They're in a completely new environment than they've known. So was there any kind of extra planning that went into this intake to make sure that the people who signed up to foster the beagles were well suited for this job?
So when the beagles initially came in, they did all get seen by veterinarians, received initial medical checks, behavior checks. And a few of them we did hold back at the shelter because of medical or really advanced behavioral concerns. And the rest did get placed with foster families. Some of those were existing foster families within our network, and some of them were new. And we provided orientations to all of the foster parents on what to expect, how to support the dogs, and next steps moving forward. All of the foster parents were also provided with not only like food and basic supplies and medicine, but also crates and specialized walkie leashes that are more secure than your typical leash because these dogs were a flight risk. And the foster parents have been incredible. And they've been posting updates and sharing progress or contacting our team when they're not seeing progress for more support. As much as all of these dogs have been called fearful and shut down, and yes, the majority are, there are some of them the next morning were ready to play and were coming to the front of the kennel and wanted to be petted and be socialized and explore. So each dog's individual personality is still different, even given the circumstances that they were coming from. And so there's a range of behaviors we're seeing, and they're at different levels. I mean, I suppose just like people who experience trauma, everybody experiences it differently. And so we are recognizing that as well. And that's why some of the dogs have been able to be placed in new homes rather quickly, too.
One thing the WHS always does is make sure their animals are medically and behaviorally cleared before this happens. So I want to break that down, starting with medical clearance. So my main question is, since these dogs were from a commercial breeder facility for research, have these dogs needed extra medical attention compared to a typical rescue animal intake?
I would say our typical intake of dogs is very challenging already. So most of the animals coming to the Wisconsin Humane Society are from local sources. Over 90% are strays or surrenders, and at least 60% of them need medical intervention that goes beyond spay, neuter, and vaccines. And I would say that is true for this group as well. We have seen and treated some things like ear infections and skin infections, mammary tumors, even cancer in some of these dogs. Nearly all of them have also been on anti-anxiety medication, especially while they transition from Ridglan Farms to a shelter to a foster home to help support their anxiety.
And when it comes to behavioral clearance, right, the anxiety, all these transition they're going through, as you said, every dog is different. But what kind of behaviors are you looking for that indicates that you're confident that they're ready to be adopted?
Some of the behaviors that we like to see in a group of fearful dogs that show that they're progressing are things like coming to the front of the kennel instead of retreating into a corner. Eating and drinking normally is, of course, crucial. If the dog is not eating or drinking normally or eliminating properly, that indicates sometimes a behavioral or a medical condition. But overall, for behavioral clearance, we're looking for progress. They don't have to meet a certain benchmark, but as long as they are progressing in their confidence level, in their socialization, those behaviors with encouragement can continue in an adoptive home. Because we also know that some of these dogs will resemble a more like a household pet, a typical dog, in a few days. Others may take months or even years, or may never quite assimilate the same as I hate to say it, but like a normal household dog. So there's not a metric or a benchmark that they have to hit, but that progress in behavior is more important to be seeing, because that can be continued in an adoptive home.
Exactly. And when it comes to adoptive homes, what do people need to know when it comes to considering adopting a dog that comes from a breeding facility? Obviously, there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement to help these animals, but what do you encourage people to think about if they're seriously considering taking in one of these animals?
Yes. So when you come to the Wisconsin Humane Society, you get paired to work with an adoption counselor. And in this situation, we're sharing a lot of information with adopters about what this group of dog needs. Because of the special circumstances that they're coming from, we're really looking at adopters who can be very patient with the dogs and counseling them on letting the dog come to them, not forcing interactions, letting them explore on their own terms. Quieter households can be more supportive. Also, having another social dog at home has been really key for a lot of these dogs to learn how to be a pet in a household. We actually have been providing a 30-page packet of information to every adopter to help set them up for success with house training, anxiety, whether or not to use a crate, loose leash walking. They've never worn collars or been on leash before. Introductions to other animals, whether those are cats or dogs or new people. And so there's just a wealth of resources. And we also have a 24-hour behavior hotline that people can call and leave a message, and we'll get back to you within a day. All of those resources are being provided to adopters. We have had a few adopters, too, after realizing that their lifestyles did not quite meet what the Beagle's needs. They've actually adopted other dogs, which is wonderful because we have so many other dogs looking for new homes right now. And we've had a few adopters just decline because they learned the extent of the work needed for this special group.
Right, very important. And while no additional fosters are needed for the Beagles, what resources are you still in need of? How can people help?
Right now at the Wisconsin Humane Society, we're entering what we call summer season, and our animal intake just balloons in the summer. And this group of dogs still could use donations of soft dog treats and dog toys, as do the other animals in our care. So if people are able to make a donation from our wish list, which is available online, that would go a long way to support not only the Beagles, but the other dogs in our care.
Excellent. Well, Angela, thank you so much for joining me today to give an update on the Ridglan Beagles and for all the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Angela Speed is the VP of Marketing and Communications for the Wisconsin Humane Society. To learn more about the status of Beagles under their care and how you can support them, head on over to WUWM.com. We'll take one last break and then go down PBS memory lane to talk about the big adventures of a dog named Wishbone. There's a new doc celebrating the show, and we'll speak with the team behind it next on Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski.
What's the story, Wishbone? What's this you're dreaming of?
If you just got excited and started singing along to that theme song, either you're a PBS kid of a certain age, or perhaps you're a parent who enjoyed watching the show as much as the kids. Wishbone was a beloved PBS series that used its star, a Jack Russell Terrier, to introduce the world of classic literature to an entire generation. For many, Wishbone wasn't just a TV show. Fans still remember episodes decades later because it made books feel like an adventure. A new documentary, What's the Story, Wishbone?, goes behind the scenes to show what it took to make these stories come to life. There's archival footage, interviews with the cast and creators. It tells the story of how a scrappy public television production became this cultural touchstone. To share more about the film, I'm joined by some of the people that made both Wishbone the TV series and the documentary.
Hey, I am Joey Stewart, and I'm the director of the documentary What's the Story, Wishbone?
I'm Betty Buckley, producer of What's the Story, Wishbone.
Hi, I'm Larry Brantley. I'm a co-producer of the documentary film What's the Story, Wishbone.
And in the 90s, I provided the voice of the dog.
Oh, so nice to hear that voice again, Larry. So first of all, Larry, Betty, Joey, thank you all for joining me today on Lake Effect. I'm so excited to speak with all of you about the new documentary, What's the Story, Wishbone? This film is first off presented by Novel Tales, that's Tails, a production company founded by members of the original cast and crew, which just warms my heart and I think says a lot about this film. So to start, how long have you all wanted to do this doc? Because clearly you've remained an important part of one another's lives since working on the show together.
We've been working on this documentary for 10 years. It's a long story, but you can chop this up. So I'll just talk. Betty and I were on a film 13, 14 years ago when we started just talking shop about how it's the main thing people keep talking to us about is Wishbone. And so I said, well, hey, why don't we try and get the series going again? And Betty took a big step back and went, whoa, that's going to be grabbing a big boulder and rolling it up a huge mountain. And we gave it a shot, but development can be a long, difficult process, and it just dragged on and went on and on. And so we email, we phone call, we do Zooms all the time. It's like, well, it's the 30th year anniversary coming up. Let's do a documentary about it. We're filmmakers. We can do that. And that's what the fans want. So it's 10 full years. I think we even, a Facebook memory came up a while back that was 9 years ago. Larry was in my office doing the voiceover for the sizzle reel when we were going out to shop the documentary. And we actually took it to some companies. Companies were very interested, but they wanted control of the documentary. And we said, well, we want to tell our story. So we don't need those people. So we just decided to do it ourselves.
Well, and it kind of is similar to the scrappy ingenuity that the show first kind of started with, right? So let's talk about Wishbone's unlikely beginning. Can you share how Rick Duffield came up with the concept of a dog, essentially introducing kids to classic literature?
Rick was putting together some focus groups to try to develop a show with a dog. And at one point, it was going to be a bulldog in New Orleans. And we didn't know if we could use the title Wishbone. And basically, there was a lot of energy and excitement about using the idea of Wishbone and taking it into more kind of just everyday neighborhood. And Rick brought in Stephanie. And that's really when everything started to coalesce, is we just started, and I do this to this day. We just decided we're going to make one. Let's write the first script. Let's write the pilot. Let's figure out what this world is. So that's where it started, was once we got beyond the focus groups and really honed in on using the name of Wishbone and connecting it with books. He was inspired by his own dog, honestly, that was a Jack Russell, and this masterpiece of world literature that was in his office, and they come together. And then you've seen that in the movie. As Stephanie started writing, Rick turned to me and said, "We need to find a dog." So once all of that happened, then very clearly we needed the voice, and then putting together the team. While it was a joy to pull together, but it was actually making the dog work and the story work that was the biggest challenge.
Right. And you had the very important job of finding the dog, and you landed on Soccer eventually, but you, of course, saw so many dogs before that. What were you looking for, or was it just kind of going off of a feeling as you met all these canines?
So, yes, we went to LA, and I've worked with Steve Martin's Working Wildlife before. So we just went to LA, and it was like, I don't know, on the list were like 100 dogs. And each on the list would be that matched the VHS tape was the height of the dog, the weight of the dog, the level of performance of the dog, all of that. And the very last dog was Soccer. And he did that little flip, and I remember being in my hotel room going, I like this one. And there was another one he was considering, and he went home and thought about it. But he kind of had his heart on a Jack Russell because he owned a Jack Russell. So it was his decision in that, and I'm so glad he decided on Soccer.
Yeah, I truly can't imagine a different host. Now, Larry, you're the voice of Wishbone, played by Soccer. How much did you know about this job before you auditioned?
Not a thing. Literally not a thing. My agent called and said, I'm sending you on a voice audition. I said, awesome. What is a voice audition? Because I had only been in Dallas for a few months. And I'd been on camera auditions. And she said, well, figure it out, genius. It's you, instead of being in front of a camera, you're behind a microphone. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I remember going to the Color Dynamics building, and I remember walking into the booth, and there was a gentleman there whose name was David Booth. And he handed me a piece of copy with no context whatsoever, other than this is a dog. And I, of course, as an actor, had lots of questions for this poor sound engineer who couldn't answer any one of them because he was just as in the dark about what this was as I was. So I did the audition sort of blind, and I guess whatever that was enough to get me to the callback. And I thought it was going to be at another studio, except it was at a house. And I walked in, and in the sitting room were half a dozen other voice actors, all of whom I knew, and every single one of them who had decades of experience more than I did. And I thought, oh, this is where I fall down on my face and don't get this, whatever this is. But I do remember walking in and seeing Betty Buckley, Rick Duffield, Burt Guthrie, Stephanie Simpson for the first time, along with Jackie Captain and Soccer. And that was when I realized that, oh, this is a real live dog. And then I got even more scared because I thought, how is this going to work? And I don't want to give too much of that process away because we talk about it a lot in the film, in the doc. But suffice to say, because of my ignorance and not knowing any better, I guess I went in the complete opposite direction that almost every other actor auditioning for that role went. And ultimately, that's what landed me the job. It wasn't because I had experience. It wasn't because I had come up with a voice. My whole thing was in that moment, capturing the personality of the dog, making it playful, as Rick likes to say, and then thinking I had completely blown my audition, walking out and getting contacted some weeks later and being told I had the job.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story, and there's such an importance of Wishbone's voice, both in the contemporary setting for when he's in the modern day with his family and the literature, and you get to have so many voices, accents. Everything spans so many of these stories. How was it for you as a voice actor, and essentially your first voice acting job? Was it daunting? What kind of fun challenges and things did you work through in real time?
The first part of that is it was terrifying. The greatest thing for me as a very inexperienced actor was the moment of the first table read, which was for Twisted Tale, because the first episode we shot was Oliver Twist. I remember walking in, sitting down. I knew some of these faces, but I haven't met anybody personally yet. And when we started to do the table read, both contemporary side and fantasy side, the first thing that my brain said to me was, you've got to become a better actor fast. Because you basically got the job because you're kind of a wise ass and funny, but that's not going to cut it with these people. I mean, they are trained, seasoned, experienced actors, and they automatically started making me better. They helped me up my game, and it was really almost like by osmosis, right? And so it was at that first table read that Rick and Betty determined that they wanted to have me on set during principal photography with the other actors standing off stage, but connected to a microphone, and they could hear my voice and I could hear them, and we could actually act in scenes together. And everybody hopefully gets lifted up by that. But that process made me a better actor, and they became really good friends. So, which is kind of more important, if I'm being honest.
And Joey, can you share how you first heard of the job and your roles in the Wishbone production?
Sure, I'd worked with Betty on commercials. I was just a little young kid trying to make my way in the film industry as a PA, and then moved up into second AD. So just kind of behind the scenes, and Betty brought me on as the second AD on the trailer, and then offered me the job as the second AD on the show. And about 2 or 3 episodes in, correct me, Betty, the first AD just decided this was not his cup of tea, didn't like the long form format, wanted to go back to commercials. And they kind of asked me if I thought I could do it. And I just was a nervous little kid trying to work my way up in the industry. And I said yes, and sweated bullets the entire time and had no real clue what I was doing. But I did took what I learned from being behind the scenes and watching how sets run and how to make them move efficiently. And I just did it by instinct. And as a nervous, sweating AD, it worked out.
Well, you all fondly say in the documentary that Wishbone was made with, quote, a bunch of people who didn't know what they were doing. But it didn't necessarily hold you back, right? People's inexperience. How was this a strength for the production and how the crew came together?
I think there's a truism in life that a lot of times ignorance truly is bliss. We were all young filmmakers. Many of us were at the start of our careers. I certainly was. I didn't come into this with anything other than I'm employed for a while. This is going to be awesome. So things like Rick and Betty's decision to have me on set instead of just isolating me in a booth, the decisions we made to promote from within to bring Joey up to AD, nobody told us that we couldn't, so we did. And I think that was a huge dynamic of the way we created the show. I mean, Betty, are you with me on that or?
Yes, and I would also say there were some of us that had some experience, but in different ways. So I'd been on some features, but more on features as like a production coordinator. And then I was production managing sort of narrative films, but they weren't this type of entertainment. Bert had some experience in films and features as a cinematographer. But what was really unique is what we created was all brand new because it was such a different process. An actor on set with a dog, these two complete stories. We called it the fantasy set and the contemporary set. So that's what sort of less experience created a new experience of what worked. So we were just trying to find our way with what worked.
I'm just going to take a moment to reintroduce you all. I'm Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski, speaking with Joey Stewart, Betty Buckley, and Larry Brantley, the team behind the new documentary, What's the Story, Wishbone? So let's talk about production and the scale of production for a moment. We'll start firstly with stories, right? The central line to all these episodes. How did you decide which classic books to make into an episode? Like, did they need certain themes or elements in order to be good candidates?
That really is a better question for our showrunner, head writer, Stephanie. But basically, I'll share with you what I know of the process in that they built lists and we built a research team to look at the books and first of all, decide what's in the public domain. Stephanie read every book, then tried to pull themes out of that could work for the dog, then try to adapt it. So the most important episode was really the first one because it sort of made the pattern both on a creative level and then for me, I could a budget level, and I literally created a pattern budget. So there were a few stories that didn't adapt well for one reason or another. I think one of the ones I've heard Joey and Larry talk about is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which would have been wonderful, but there are limits, right? But we collectively, but really the writing team and Rick guiding all that, did not shy away from look at the themes in Joan of Arc. So it did not shy away from that. So, but there were some books that didn't adapt perfectly. But that being said, there were so many more books that we did not get to embrace.
Yeah. So with the writing process, the proof of concept was pitched. It was picked up for 5 episodes. And it's like, okay, 40 episodes, please. Was that amount of episodes for a season typical for how kids shows operated during this time?
No.
So you're like, okay, I guess we'll do it.
I think at the time, I remember what was the norm was 26 episodes for a season.
Okay.
But again, this kind of came back to, well, we didn't know, just like Rick said. And I don't know why I said yes, because we did the 5 and then they asked for 35 more. And we were all like, oh my God, but happy, but also blown away. So no, that was not normal.
Well, major props to you guys for doing that because it's the level of detail, everything that was put into it. And I just recall like it was a constant presence right after school for me. And I know during this production, it's very intensive. You're all in this nice kind of production bubble with yourselves. But did you all have a moment of looking around after a work day or in the middle of set and be like, I think this is going to work. This is special. Like, when did that impact settle in?
For me, it happened when we went on tour in support of the show. So right after the first season dropped, Rick and Betty decided that Soccer and I should go on the road in support of the show. So I remember the very first live appearance we ever did to the PBS station in Atlanta, Georgia. And of course, Jackie Captain was there. And there may or may not have been, like Mary Chris Wall or Angie Hughes would have been with me. The level of excitement at that appearance was unbelievable. I was not prepared for it. And all subsequent places where we went, that just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Please keep in mind, this is pre-internet days. This is pre-social media days. So this was becoming a thing simply by dint of the fact that it was airing on PBS stations across the country. So I think we all kind of knew that what we were doing was different. It certainly was something none of us had ever seen in the spectrum of children's television. But again, as you said, we were in our bubble, right? We were just had our heads down making the show. And for me, it took getting out on the road to realize, oh, more people than just us are watching. That's awesome.
Yeah. How about for you, Joey?
I think I didn't realize what it was, what an impact it has until I got off Wishbone and went straight to another show. as an AD, you're working, getting up at 4:30, and you're getting on set by 6, you're getting home at 8:30. And, I'd heard from my parents and my family how great they thought the show was, and some magazine articles came out and things like that. But it was not till I immediately jumped to another TV show, might have been Walker, Texas Ranger or something, or another movie, that that's just the main focus of what the crew would say was like, oh my God, you did Wishbone? That's such a fantastic show. And it was one after another after another. So it was really when I jumped onto the next project and heard from the cast and crew from the next project what a big deal it was. And slowly it dawned on me how special it was.
And for you, Betty, what was that moment, or what does it continue to mean to you?
Well, for one thing, Larry gives me a lot of credit that we had a wonderful marketing team that planned, that tour. And that really blew my mind, because they're basically standing in line to see a dog sit in a chair. That really blew my mind. But the Television Critics Award was really special. We were in our bubble, and I remember begging Rick, like, please, can we go see what that is, and get out of the bubble. And that was really amazing. That was really fun. The enduring part of it is the fact that we're here right now, and that what sparked that for me was some of the Zooms we had during the pandemic, and I think Joey, you organized this, where I would be like, there's 30 people that showed up with 30 minutes notice, or 20, or however many it was, but it's like, but it's been forever, and we just kind of wanted to hang out. And I was like, wow. So that's been really great. I mean, I've heard Larry talk about what's the most important thing is friendships that come out of it. I would agree with that. That's really powerful. It was fun being a part of the team, and it's fun knowing that other people enjoyed it as much as I do. When we were filming it, we had one of our crew members has a brew pub, and we were there, and I remember Michael Haynes saying, this is like a family reunion with people you really want to be with. I love that one.
Absolutely. So this documentary is marking the 30th anniversary of the show, and Wishbone is truly a cultural phenomenon with so much impact. Everyone who grew up with this show is so excited for this documentary, and just me sharing with people that, I get to talk to the Wishbone people. They're like so excited. Everyone is sending so much love. And thanks for creating one of the most uniquely inspiring children's series of all time. So we all still remember it so well and very fondly. So I just want to give you all so much credit in real time for your impact that you had on us. And it was so heartwarming to have Wishbone back on my screen in some form watching this documentary. So now that my love fest is over, what kind of feelings have you all had putting this documentary together, and how do you hope it resonates with audiences today?
I think it was fantastic to put together. It was a joy. And you just, when you're making something, a film, you never know how it's going to hit. Everyone is different. And we didn't know if this would reach 100 people or 1,000 or 100,000. And it's, as it's slowly the word is getting out, the feedback has just been huge and exceptional. And the few people that have been able to see it have just been so gracious with their comments and so positive. It's just fantastic.
Go ahead, Betty.
Oh, I just want to say props to Joey, because he just really wanted to make this. And I remember at one point he debated, should he direct it? And I was like, I think Larry and I were like, well, absolutely, And so it's just been fun to be a part of a new process, just like creating the show.
I will share a story from the only live screening of this film that we've had to date, which was in November of last year, and it was cast and crew only. And Joey worked double overtime to coordinate this, to get us into the Angelica Theater, and sent out all the invites, thinking we'd be lucky if 25, 30 people showed up. The theater sold out, and it was nothing but cast and crew and their family. And wow, that moment where we stood in front of all of our friends, many of whom we hadn't seen in 30 years, that they would come from somewhere, from as far away as California, Kansas City. I mean, they had to be there. They had to be there and be a part of it. That's a big part of the reason why I agreed to co-produce this film, is because it was way past time for every single one of those folks to have their story told, and to lift the curtain up, if you will, and say, yes, this show has a lasting legacy. Yes, kids grew up with a lifelong love of reading. They're passing that on to their children now. Here are the people who made that possible. Stand up and give them some applause. That was it for me. But that was a great question, Audrey.
Well, I hope as you guys continue to talk to others and screen this to the wider public that you continue getting the flowers and all the cast and crew behind this, because truly it was such an amazing show that ended too soon. But I say crowdsource to keep this going. If other production companies want to control it, just say the word. We'll rally behind you. But for today, Joey, Betty, and Larry, thank you so much for speaking with me. It was such a joy.
Yeah, Audrey, thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Joey Stewart is the director of the documentary What's the Story, Wishbone. Betty Buckley is a producer, and Larry Brantley is a co-producer of the documentary and the voice of Wishbone. You can watch the documentary on public television stations from May 27th through June 9th, and the film will be available to rent or buy on major digital platforms on June 10th. There is so much more that we talked about, from what it was like to work with Soccer the dog and more stories from making Wishbone, and you can find our full conversation at wuwm.com. That wraps up today's Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. If you've missed any of the conversations on Lake Effect, you can find all of them at wuwm.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll bring you the next part of our Milwaukee Socialist series, where we'll learn about Milwaukee's first socialist mayor. Plus, we'll look ahead to this weekend's Heal the Hood event. Thank you so much for joining us today, right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM Milwaukee's NPR.